in your fucking boss. Oh, how's it going, Leg? Hello, Faraday. Whoa, what the fuck are you coming from? They come from everywhere! This is... Ow!
One of the oldest tricks in level design is something called a spawn closet. One of the most common challenges a player faces in video games are enemies to overcome. As level designers, we're responsible for distributing them in the level and often directing their behavior. But in video game development, as well as trying to create fun and engaging moments, we're always facing practical and technical limitations. And on many occasions, we'd like to introduce additional enemies into an encounter, either as continuous waves to provide an extra challenge to the player, or as a consequence of player actions, for example triggering an alarm in games that have a stealth component. Let's say we have a combat arena that's normally part of a larger level layout or even an open world. But what do we do when the player has eliminated those enemies, and instead of this encounter being over immediately afterwards, we want other enemies to arrive and keep the tension going? If we just spawn them into existence, the player would see them appearing out of nowhere. In some games like Control, this fits the thematic and is perfectly fine. But in many games, this would break the player's suspension of disbelief and therefore ruin the immersion. We could distribute some spawns in more hidden corners of the map and behind objects, which is definitely something that is done in plenty of games, though not every layout and situation is suited for this, and often results in us having to spawn the enemies pretty far away. And the player might be left wondering where all those enemies came from, with no obvious entry point being visible anywhere. If we want to spawn enemies closer to the action, we can add some spawn closets to our layout. We can still try to apply the same logic to them, trying to spawn enemies out of sight, but we don't have to be as strict about it, as when the player does catch enemies spawning, it's completely justified by them emerging from a sensible location. Now, of course, a spawn closet doesn't have to be some little enclosed room, and as a designer, you're free to come up with different visual variations that feel natural to your world building. So get creative and find ways to implement enemy spawns in a way that fits the thematic of the world that you're building. If you want to learn more about level design tips, tricks, and design principles, check out my other videos on my YouTube channel, TimDoesLevelDesign.